Please be seated. Councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen, please note that tonight's council meeting will be live streamed to the web. All votes will be by showing of hands, and we don't have any apologies. So,
apology from Councillor Marsh.
He's sitting there. From Councillor Marsh for early departure.
And Councillor Ahupini Mercer for lateness.
And Councillor Ahupini Mercer for lateness. I move those. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Free. Please vote on accepting that apology. Those in favour? Anyone? So everyone's hand's gone up. Unanimous. I would like to start with an announcement. As you know, the capital played host to the Edinburgh Tattoo over 4 magnificent evenings which concluded on Sunday night, and I was delighted to see most of you there. The 2016 Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo made history as the biggest crowd puller of any show staged in the capital. And just as the Wellington and New Zealand audiences were enthralled by the tattoo, our guests were equally delighted with the experiences in the capital. Edinburgh Tattoo Chief Executive and Producer Brigadier David Olfrey said the people of Wellington have been so welcoming and considerate at every turn. It's been the talk of the whole team, and for many of them, the sound of 21,000 people humming Polkare Kara Ana in tune with Maori vocalists and the bands will be the abiding memory of the tour. And in recognition of their wonderful time here in Wellington, the Lord Provost of Edinburgh, the Right Honourable Donald Wilson, presented me with this ceremonial broadsword. This is an exquisite sword. I haven't tested its sharpness yet. Each year at the Tattoo in Edinburgh, a Scottish officer's broadsword is awarded to the contingent to have contributed the most to the tattoo experience as voted by the performers. The sword is much coveted, and the winner is announced in front of Edinburgh Castle before the march-off at the close of the last performance of the summer. The Edinburgh Tattoo were kind enough to have 2 special broadswords made by Pooley Swords, 1 each for Melbourne and Wellington, in recognition of their tour down under, and I'm delighted to receive this sword on behalf of Wellington City. So I'd like to thank the Edinburgh team, all of the local staff and volunteers for their unstinting efforts to make the tattoo a huge success. And we'll find a beautiful and safe place to display. I also was given by the Lord Provost of Edinburgh a poem to the city from Edinburgh, and you may judge yourselves whether the word or the sword is mightier, the pen or the sword is mightier. I now move to our Absolutely Positively Wellingtonian Awards, and I'd like to start with a citation for Bill Gosden. It's my pleasure to present an Absolutely Positively Wellingtonian Award to Bill Gosden MNZM, for his work with the New Zealand International Film Festival. Bill is currently the festival director, having joined the team in 1979. And being appointed the Federation's Programme Director in 1980. His busy team coordinate a programme of films shown at Wellington, Auckland and then at other New Zealand centres. Wellington last year, the festival sold more than 73,000 tickets during the 17-day event, more than 450 screenings of more than 150 new films in 8 Wellington venues. And I'd like to really acknowledge Bill's work that contributes hugely to our reputation as the cultural capital. On behalf of Wellington City Council, I'd like to thank Bill and declare him an absolutely positively Wellingtonian. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Celia. I think I should start by saying that I've been a dyed-in-the-wool Wellingtonian since I moved here and experienced my first earthquake in 1976. I wondered how people could possibly live here, and now, all these years later, I find myself still living here very happily. So, it's personally extremely gratifying to be officially admitted to the ranks of absolutely positive Wellingtonians. Of course, I must also see this honour as a recognition of the role that the film festival plays in Wellington. I know that a lot of cities are very jealous of their cultural events, so it's really good to know that we've been forgiven for exporting our model to a dozen other New Zealand towns and cities. The fact is that New Zealand as a whole would be much poorer if Wellington hadn't been such a great incubator for so many great arts projects and film projects in particular. We certainly have the most nurturing audience here, with the highest per capita film festival attendance of any city we know, not just in New Zealand, but in the entire world. Our per capita attendance at the film festival far exceeds that of the film festival in Edinburgh, Toronto, many other very well-known film festivals don't enjoy the public support that the festival does in Wellington. And I also have to mention the extremely positive support that we've received from the city since 2003, when the council stepped in to rescue the Embassy Theatre and secure our annual access to that most beautiful of all venues. And finally, of course, I must acknowledge the fact that I stand on the shoulders of many others. Many volunteers. The festival started as a volunteer organisation, was founded by Lindsay Shelton, and since then there's been an extraordinary succession of volunteers and professional staff keeping this festival alive. So thanks to them, and particularly to my colleagues in the room this evening. Cheers, and thanks again.
And now it's my great pleasure to read the citation for a joint award for Robin and John White for their work in the Nio community. Robin White joined the Nio Crofton Downs Residents Association Committee in 2002, becoming secretary in 2009 and president in 2014. She's also been a leader of the Makararua Street Reserve Care Group. Due to illness, Robin has had to step back from her Residents Association duties, so John has stepped up and joined the committee, and he is the current secretary. Robin and John are often described as pillars of the Nio community. Robin has been advocating for the community and its natural environment for more than a decade. The Whites have contributed to making improvements to Cummings Park, creating a predator-free environment for our wildlife, and making their community safe and vibrant. Recently, Robin's passion for the natural environment resulted in her and John working with the council on the Kaka Cam project, nicknamed the Kakadation Project, an initiative to protect a nest of kaka chicks within the Makararua Reserve and live stream their progress. This stream was viewed nearly 65,000 times, as far abroad as Russia and the United States. So again, previous award promoting us as a cultural capital, this award promoting us as a natural capital. To help the Kaka survive, Robin and John motivated the local community to keep their cats indoors and their dogs on leashes, and coordinated the locals to keep watch over the fledglings until they were safe. And the end result was that 3 Kaka chicks fledged in the unfenced wild, the first time for over a century in Wellington. Robin and John have shown great community leadership, an ability to mobilise and activate their community, and have always taken a team-oriented approach. So on behalf of the Wellington City Council, I'd like to thank Robin and John and declare them absolutely positively Wellingtonians.
I was told I had a very short time, and then one or two councillors whispered into my ear that I could slightly disregard that. I'm going to compromise. Right. Add a few little things. Well, we're very, very delighted to accept this award because we see it as recognition of what people working in communities are doing to make Wellington a better city. These people are frequently unseen. There are many people who worked in very similar ways to what Robin and I do to improve the natural environment and to build stronger communities within Nio and Crofton Downs. So we're standing up here, but we see ourselves as representing those people and really want to say that we feel that we're accepting this reward on behalf of all of us. I'll just focus on a few thank yous that relate to the Kaka nest in the local reserve. I'll avoid giving its name, Celia, because I struggle. If you go to Nio Primary School, you pronounce it beautifully, I have to say. So first of all, thank you Trevor Lloyd, who's here, and others for developing and maintaining the track that enabled us to appreciate what we had at our back door. Thank you to the 28 members of our community who volunteered to help with protecting the Kaka. Thank you, Councillor Wolf, for your great encouragement and support during the Kaka protection time. Thanks very much, Park Ranger Matt Robertson, for operating Kaka Cam. I don't know whether you knew at the start what you were letting yourself in for, but once it went viral, then everyone was saying, you know, we've got to do something. What about the cats? What about the dogs and all the rest? So that meant that the council wasn't going to stop the local community doing what it could to protect the chicks. Also, Matt, thank you for providing the expertise that enabled our group to function effectively and for trusting us. Finally, thank you all the cat and dog owning residents near the reserve for responding so positively and helping to keep the carcass safe. For me, this provided a wonderful lesson about what communities can do when they share a common goal. Thanks very much.
The recipients and their families are, of course, most welcome to stay for the whole of the democratic process this evening. But if you just felt that you'd like to leave now, please do so. Have you got a copy of the late report? Because I'm not sure I've got one. Oh, great, thank you. While people are going out, I think we can manage to see whether there are any conflict of interest declarations. For Councillor Foster for the late item. Any other conflicts of interest? Thank you. And I move the minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 16th of December and the extraordinary council meeting held on the 10th of February. They've been circulated. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Coghlan. So let's vote on accepting them. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. So I now move a late item. Elected member travel to Malaysia for the Resilient Cities Asia Pacific Congress 2016. It wasn't on the agenda because it was only received after on the 17th of February. The Congress is early March, so I move that we put it onto the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Free. Those in favour? Oh, it's about whether it should go on the agenda or not. It's a procedural motion. So those in favour of it going on the agenda so that one can then debate it? Thank you. That's unanimously carried. There is no public participation this evening, and I will move to general business 2.1. Councillor Foster, please introduce the district plan change 79.
Just very quickly, because it's all pretty self-explanatory there, the main thing to say is that we only have two choices. We either accept it or we reject it. If we reject it, then there is the joyful proposition that we may all end up having to hear it again. This is it was a private plan change which we did not adopt. We accepted it. Essentially, you've only got three choices: adopt, accept, or reject. There was no reason to reject it, but the reasons for that are set down in the Resource Management Act, and they're fairly limited. It was heard by a commissioner. It went through the whole notification process. 5 submissions, 1 further submission heard by a commissioner. You've got the recommendations there in front of you, and essentially what it is to rezone one site which is next to the Newtown suburban centre from in a residential to a suburban centre. The recommendations do include some specific site-specific things in terms of the height that will pertain there to protect amenity for the surrounding neighbours, and I think that's probably all that I need to say, other than that once we've made our decision, then there is the potential for any of the submitting parties to appeal should they so desire to do so. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the process, but it's the one bit that we get to have a say should we so desire. So I move and look for a seconder.
Who would like to second? Thank you, Councillor Coghlan. Any debate? Councillor Panic.
Look, I'd like to thank, obviously, the submitter and the Commissioner for sitting on this. I'm going to vote against it, though, colleagues, and the reason for this is the following. First of all, unfortunately, one of the salient issues was not discussed by the Commissioner. One of the submitters asked why was this not a resource consent rather than a plan change, and I think that is an excellent point, because I think we are starting to see a slightly worrying trend of going down that track. The district plan is there for a reason, so that we have rules and we make them in a coherent way rather than on a piecemeal basis, and especially for those that can afford them, because of course there is a cost in bringing these changes. We shouldn't have a system of justice for those who can afford it and those who can't. And I think, given we've had lots of discussion about the integrity of the district plan, this sort of piecemeal approach is not desirable, and it is a shame that the Commissioner didn't look at that issue. Another issue, given I work in this area, we have a common problem of demolition by neglect. This was a point raised by one of the submitters. Building owners do need the message that there are responsibilities in owning a building, and we shouldn't be allowing people to take heritage protections away for the sake of one particular development. We know that we have made a commitment to heritage in the city, and we need to take that seriously. Because I am, I represent where I do, I am sympathetic to the argument of the concern of residents about the encroachment of commercial activity into residential areas. Very common problem in the Lambton area, and why there has been some quite fierce activity to stop that happening. While sometimes mixed use is desirable, there does need to be some separation as well. And Newtown is already dense enough. We don't actually need more density in there. And I also have some sympathy for the arguments of residents around the site coverage and the bulk of the buildings. I appreciate there was some attempt to mitigate that, and obviously the reduced height limit will help. But I do find this slightly unsatisfactory, and I do think that we need to encourage the public to go through the resource consent process. That's what it's there for.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Young.
Just very briefly, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say that I agree with almost everything Councillor Pannett says, which of course is always a very rare thing at Council. But I am slightly queasy about this, but I am particularly concerned about this idea of demolition by neglect, which is quite an issue in Lambton Ward. When you walk, cycle, drive or whatever around the ward, you can see quite a few old heritage properties that really need some money spent on them and some care. And I just wonder what tools we have as a council to force people to look after their properties. I don't know, and I just float this as something we perhaps need to look at. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Wolfe, followed by Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Councillor Pannett, I've been persuaded by your argument. I was seriously... I listened to what you said, and I agree. We do need some changes and a review of our district plan in certain areas, and there is an ad hocness that tends to take place. I also agree with your comments regarding resource consents and various other arguments that you've put in this debate to date, and I will be supporting you.
The Ritchie.
Yes, I just have a question of the mover. I'm interested to hear that there is debate on a hearing without those persons having heard the evidence. So this is not a political debate. It is a planning decision by a commissioner who's delegated to make a decision. So I would like to hear the chair's opinion on that, please. Thank you. And also, actually, on the vote, I mean, it is, if councillors have an opinion and a view, then we all need to really rehear it, although we won't all be of the same view, fortunately, so we probably won't all rehear it.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else on the speaking list. I'm sure Councillor Foster will respond to the points raised.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I'll start with Councillor Ritchie, and she's absolutely dead right on this one. And this is that we are debating the merits of something that, you know, somebody else has said. It's a bit like us debating something that's gone in, which is a New Zealand sport, is debating what judges decide on all kinds of things without necessarily having heard a lot of the evidence. The point that I think I ought to alert you to on page 8:13, if the recommendations are rejected, then the hearing would need to be reheard by council as a whole. So there is the joy that you have. This council has never rejected a plan change, whether it's a council plan change or a private change, as this one is. It has got close on a couple of occasions. I would suggest to you this probably is not one of the ones that's massively controversial that would get to that threshold. So I'd counsel you just to think about that. In terms of some of the other things, Councillor Wolfe, changes in ad hocness. Well, I think that's the issue, is that, you know, we're administering something of the order of 100,000 properties or close to 100,000 properties, inevitably property owners are all going to want to do things at a particular time in a particular way, and we can't tell them all how to do it, when to do it, or unfortunately we can't also tell them, Councillor Young, how to maintain their properties. We can deal with it if it gets to a health and safety issue, we can do something, but unfortunately we cannot tell them, much as we would sometimes like to, that you have to paint your house, or you've got to maintain it, or you've got, we don't have those powers for good or for ill. So yes, inevitably there is going to be a degree of ad hocness about all kinds of things that happen, and that is just life, because we have a couple of 100,000 people all making their own decisions in their own way for what they see as perfectly good reason, and that is why you have what appears sometimes to planning people like ourselves as being, oh gosh, this is very ad hoc, and why aren't we controlling it? Because we can't, and sometimes we shouldn't. And the last thing, Councillor Pannett, you raised a number of issues. In terms of resource consent or plan change, I don't know which is the one which costs you more money to go down the track. I suspect the plan change probably is somewhat more expensive. But a resource consent is not necessarily cheap either, especially if it is contested, especially if it goes through an appeal process. And this is not about whether you're wealthy or not wealthy, but the law quite specifically, and I've been sitting with Councillor Peck, and he will be very well familiar with this, on another plan change, which again is a private plan change. But we had very much put in front of us that both of these avenues are provided for in the law. The Resource Management Act says you can go down the resource consent process, or you can go down the plan change process, and both of them are allowed. Now, if they weren't intended to be allowed, the law wouldn't have been written that way. It has been, and therefore we should not be making a judgment about it. Perhaps we should be putting submissions and saying private plan changes shouldn't be allowed, and that should be the thing we should do if we don't agree with them, Councillor Pannett. But the law allows for it, and that is, and we have to deal with them. And as I said, we could not reject it. We have to either accept it or adopt it. And so we've accepted it, it's gone down the private plan change process, and we've got the Commissioner's decisions at the moment. You made some other points about encroachment, etc. I don't think I need to respond to those. There are issues there, and there are issues of balance. Sometimes we have residential activity encroaching into commercial areas, sometimes we have commercial activity encroaching into residential areas. Usually these things require resource consents. I don't think it's a failing of our plan, and it clearly is something which is allowed for in the Resource Management Act.
Thank you. Please,
Could you
vote.
take 1 and 2 separately?
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely. So we've got receive the information. Please vote on that. Passed unanimously. And secondly, adopt the recommendations of the Hearing Commissioner in respect of Plan Change 79. Those in favour? Do you want to call them out, please?
Councillor Foster, Councillor Coghlan, Councillor Lester, Councillor Lee, Councillor Free, Councillor Ricci, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Young, Councillor Sparrow, and Councillor Peck. Your Worship.
And I got the sword there. Goodness gracious. And against?
Councillor Wolfe, Councillor Pennant.
I declare it carried. I will now move, don't worry. I'll now move to item 2.2, the late item, and Councillor Foster's declaring, I think, a hopeful conflict of interest here, which is fine. There are a number of issues about urban resilience. I've discussed this also with Councillor Sparrow, who's very strong on the community resilience aspects. I did feel, however, that given it was a request for the Mayor to go, that a chair of one of the committees would be an appropriate person to go, particularly with knowledge of the built and urban infrastructure. So I think this is a huge opportunity. I've discussed it with Councillor Foster, although that's, somebody else can move somebody else, that's fine. And if we're fairly certain that the funding will come through, councillors, we're fairly confident that the funding will come through, but if for some reason it doesn't he won't be going. There was a suggestion by officers that we put some funding in, but so I just want to be absolutely clear on that. ICLEI is a very well-known and respected organisation. It's an opportunity to talk about the leadership that Wellington's showing, whether it's from the Blue Lines project right through to our innovative engineering experience and the disaster resilience hub at Massey University and many other things. You can tell I would have quite liked to have gone, can't you? Anyway, I will be moving it, and if we agree it, we will then call for nominations. So, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Coghlan. Does anyone wish to speak?
I'm going to oppose this, and I'm sure Councillor Foster really wants to go, but I guess I do feel slightly uncomfortable about the climate industry, which is rapidly developing, where people jet around the world to talk about how they can reduce climate change. And I'm actually, frankly, a little bit sick of it. I think obviously there's some benefits from Western nations interacting with, Asia and Africa. I think that would be a fruitful two-way conversation, and or three-way in that case. But I am uncomfortable with a lot of talk fests. I would expect any councillor attending to do as well as they can to make sure that it is a productive opportunity and a productive use of time, so that we're actually achieving something and not just having a nice chat with people who agree with us.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone else wish to speak? Just in right of reply, I say I've just been to a short part of the climate change conference at Victoria University, which we didn't need to do carbon credits for me to actually go there. And it was hugely valuable to meet the young people from Nauru and Papua New Guinea and Fiji and actually hear their direct tales from people who are living in the eye of the storm. So I don't think you should underestimate the opportunities to bring together experts in this way. So I'm moving 1 through 4, 5, and then we will call for nominations so that passes. So those in favour of 1 through 5, please raise your hand. Put me first then. How about then? Don't forget me.
Your Worship the Mayor, Councillor Lester, Councillor Coghlan, Councillor Wolf, Councillor Lee, Councillor Free, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Young, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Pennant, Councillor Peck.
I declare that carried. Now, I call for nominations. Are there any nominations? I will nominate Councillor Foster. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sparrow, thank you. Councillor Coghlan's in a hurry this evening. Good on you, Councillor Coghlan. Councillor Sparrow is seconding, however. Do I have any other nominations? So let us now vote on whether we send Councillor Foster. Return journey. So number 6. Those in favour? Me?
Your Worship the Mayor, Councillor Coghlan, Councillor Lester, Councillor Wolf, Councillor Lee, Councillor Free, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Young, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Pennant, Councillor Peck.
And those against?
Councillor Eagle.
I declare that carried and look forward to hearing your words of wisdom on your return, Councillor Foster. Please return to the table. And your persuasion of Councillor Pannett in particular. Now, like councillors, I'd now like to move to Councillor Ahipini Mercer is not here yet, so could somebody who is present at the reg processes please move? Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Your Worship, Councillors, I'd like to move recommendation 3.1 of the Regulatory Processes Committee. This just relates to two parcels of land, one in Northland, one in Te Aro. They're on designated road reserve, surplus to requirements, and the recommendation is for officers to undertake disposal. Thank you.
Could I just clarify you're moving the 3 Northland, Te Aro and Raroa Road?
Correct.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pannett. Does anyone wish to speak? Does anyone wish to take any separately? Then we will vote on them all together. Those in favour?
Your Worship, Councillor Foster, Councillor Coghlan, Councillor Lester, Councillor Wolfe, Councillor Lee, Councillor Free, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Young, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Pennant, and Councillor Peck.
Thank you very much. I declare those carried. And I'd now like to move the motion that we go into public excluded to consider the following reports: external appointment to the Audit and Risk Committee and the PE report of GFP, and that we permit Adam Holloway and Kerry Anderson to remain. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Peck. Please vote on whether we go into public excluded. Can you start the other way round, to be fair? His arm's going to fall off.
It's unanimous. Unanimous.
No, it's not.
Councillor Peck, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Young, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Free, Councillor Lee, Councillor Wolfe, Councillor Lester, Councillor Coghlan, and Councillor Foster, and Your Worship.
Yes. And against? Well,
Councillor Pennant.
we'd started taking the vote. So I declare that carried. We will go into public excluded, as I think and I would like to call upon, I think, Councillor Peck to introduce the report.